I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone for being here. I want to thank my thesis supervisors, Dr. Lawford and Dr. Mendre, for being here. Thank you for everyone who supported me through this process. This is going to be fairly quick and painless. Not a lot of statistics in this, just mainly results.
Give me 2 seconds there.
Sure.
So people will better see. Okay.
Awesome. All right, so the title of my project was, why do chronic things happen to good people? Sort of inspired by the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And I was interested in the rationale behind, or the explanations people give behind mental illness in religious communities, and sort of how that affects our general health and how we both support each other but give answers that can sometimes be hurtful as well. So I'll spare you the reading of the academic title, but it's up there if you want to take a peek. So I'd like to just kind of start with the example of the book of Job, which a lot of you are pretty familiar with. So the book of Job narrates, as we know, someone who experienced disaster in his lifetime, so a lot of loss and kind of out of nowhere. And I believe this quote from Job to be one of the first recorded instances of suicidal ideation in the Bible and in our historical texts. So Job says, "Why does God bother giving light to the miserable, those who want in the worst way to die and can't, who count the day of their death and burial the happiest day of their life? What's the point of life when it doesn't make sense?" So this is obviously a person experiencing some serious distress because of the illness that has befallen them. And this is just to give an example that mental illness is not just a today issue, and also not just a secular issue. I think that religious communities and secular communities all experience mental illness. So why did I want to do this project? Well, this is generally an unresearched topic in this area, in this region. And it's a new topic in research as well. So there's not a whole lot of research that's been done on the balance between the positive and the negative aspects of sort of the support, but also the answers given in religious communities towards mental illness. So the only other thing I would say about that is that a lot of the research right now has a predominantly negative bias, or mostly negative bias, in what we're reading. So really, this project could have gone either way. I could have found really negative things or really positive things. And we'll just kind of review a little bit of the negativity that was seen out in the literature and actually also in the Bible. So some of the literature stated that explanations for mental illness talked about spiritually oriented causes and treatments. So that could be anything from torment to, sin and where did it come from. And then there's also an understanding of mental illness to be a result of sin or an issue with morality. And this is not necessarily a definitive answer, but this is the reasons that people have given. So I'm definitely not giving you guys definitive answers. I encourage you to take this home, chew on it for a little while and decide what you believe and what you think about this information. So I also made a connection with another expert in this field, Dr. Marie Good, who's also a friend of Dr. Lawford, and she does research on stigma about religious communities. Her research is predominantly about people believing that Christians can't be scientists, and why do we believe that, and why are those two things connected? So I asked her about this, and she told me a little bit of what she knows. Generally, we think that it's really valuable to have faith-based researchers in the research field, because then we get a whole nother perspective rather than just secular-based researchers. And my supervisors have been extremely supportive of this, and I'm really thankful for them. So another quote I want to pull from Job is from Eliphaz the Temanite, one of Job's friends who comes to comfort him. And I kind of stuck together 3 different reasons he gives for the hardship that Job is experiencing. He says, "It's my observation that those who plow evil and sow trouble reap evil and trouble." And then later on in the book he says, "If I were in your shoes, I'd go straight to God. I'd throw myself on the mercy of God. What a blessing when God steps in and corrects you." And then later in the book he says, "Mind you, don't despise the discipline of Almighty God." So these are some And it's up to you to decide whether you believe this to be positive or negative, but it was qualified in the research field as more negative explanations. So this is more of Marie Good's research if you ever want to look her up. So what did I find on the positive end of things? Well, religiosity and spirituality, going to church is connected to a lot of health benefits. So it helps you sort of have a more fulfilling life. It affects your subjective well-being, which means your belief about your own well-being. And it also helps people recover from surgery, from mental illness. There's a lot of cases that were stated that it really helps you kind of bring it along. And then I found this really interesting at the end of the book of Job. I'm sure as you guys have read, God comes and he says to Eliphaz the Temanite and Job's friends, I've had it with you and your two friends. I'm fed up. You haven't been honest with me or about me. This is from the Message. This is not the KJV. So this is an example of God coming down and saying, look, I know you're trying to be helpful. I see the reasons you're giving, but I don't believe that they're helpful, and I want to give a different reason for why Job is experiencing this hardship. So what was I looking for? I was looking for whether personal stories about mental illness would show themes that keep reoccurring. So are different people experiencing the same thing? I also wanted to know if our religious communities had some mental illness stigma. And then I had two more questions. I wanted to know whether people who have a strong faith have a style of explaining things that's based on faith or related to faith. And then the last thing I wanted to know was, do people who have a mental illness experience more or less stigma than their family members who are giving care or taking care of them? So very quickly, if any of you participated, it's anonymous, so I don't know who did and who didn't, but you might recognize some of these questions. This was assessing the reason-giving style. This was assessing religiosity, so how committed you are to your faith. This was assessing stigma, and so is this. One was for family members, one was for the person with it, and then the turning point stories. So, what did I find? And these are sort of things about how I calculated it. If you have more questions about it, you can come up to me after. I'll spare everyone the details of how I calculated this. What I found, and I think this is such an encouraging result, our communities in religiosity had no associations with stigma, which I found really cool. Actually, the only thing that did correlate was the opposite of stigma. So social withdrawal was negatively correlated with religiosity, which means the more religious you are, the less you withdraw socially from your community, which is pretty cool. The only thing I would say about that is sometimes when we're experiencing difficulty, we're less likely to talk about it. So maybe the people who do feel withdrawn from their community because they're experiencing illness might not have had the opportunity or felt like they could talk about it. But thank you to the people who took the time to talk about it. So, the other finding, do Christians have a way of explaining things or giving reasons for things? I did find one thing here. So in attributional style, there are different types of explanations. So it can be internal, stable, or global. So either it's me, it'll always be me, it's my fault, or stable, it's this, it will always be this will always be the answer. Or global, this will be the answer not only for this, but for everything. So for our communities, I found that Christians have a stable way of explaining things. I can't say much more from it. All I can say is that religiosity was correlated with this. I can't say what explanation we give. I can't say if we all give the same explanation. Some examples in discussion that we thought of were maybe it's because we live in an imperfect world, or maybe it's because it's my fault, or maybe it's because God allowed it. We don't know what the answer is, but we know that a lot of people give the same answer many times. So that's an interesting point of discussion. If you guys have any ideas about it, maybe let me know. And then the last numerical hypothesis that I had findings for was that people who do experience the mental illness have higher levels of internalized stigma than their caregivers. That one was a bit intuitive. So again, more discussion about this, but generally, to me, this means everyone has their own unique experience and that we should respect that. And that if you are the person with the illness or the person giving care to the person with the illness, either way, everyone feels the effects. And the last one, and I think the most in-depth and the richest answer, was that I found a lot of reoccurring stories, 22 to be exact. And I had a bunch of negative ones so I kind of made a list of things I thought I might find. After reading the first few stories, I thought, okay, this might be a theme in the rest of them. So I wrote a list, and then I coded every single story to see if it had any of the 22 stories. The most common ones are all positive. So I feel like you guys deserve a round of applause. I think it's awesome. I think the most common things that are going on in our communities with people with mental illness are using prayer and meditation to relieve stress, having trust in God, and feeling supported. And we also have an understanding of mental illness as not just a spiritual illness, but physical, mental, emotional. So just a total understanding of it. And then you don't have to read all of them, but here are all the themes I coded for. And that's about all I have to do with kind of talking up in front of you guys here. What I did is I completely anonymized all the quotes. So you won't find any names, dates, gender, family member name, anything. And they're up on the walls behind you guys. So when you're ready, if you feel like it, we can take off the papers and read some of the stories that people shared with us. You won't be able to tell who these people are, and they're from various churches in the area, so it won't be from just this community, but many. And I just encourage you guys to have a walk around and have a look at things and see what people had to say. And then afterwards, if you would like, we can have a bit of a discussion. Maybe we'll come back here and talk about it, and then these will be some of the questions I'd like to ask you guys. So take your time, keep eating, read. I also have my research poster and then all of the statistical findings on that wall as well. If you guys have any questions for me, I'll be walking around. And then I also just wanted to encourage that a connection I made with Natalie Grenier. She's a faith-friendly psychologist in the area, and her phone number's up here. She was going to come today, but she has bronchitis. So prayers for her. Hope she gets better. But if anyone feels like they'd like to schedule a session with her or know someone who'd like to schedule a session with her, her phone number's up there, and she's volunteered to kind of take on more appointments. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't keep you for too long, and just feel free to walk around.